Dr. Jazz. Dr. Jazz.
I listen to Angular blues a lot these days, and it's you manage to achieve this one moment of egoless playing, or like it's like a band. I don't know how you do that, or what's your approach there. But if you listen to the songs that you wrote, like I don't know, Griffin, or like CG and nothing, it's and you restrain yourself. What was the process of or thinking there when doing this album actually and writing for this group?
Well, that's an interesting question. Hüttengriffe, that song, that's kind of the simplest possible song that I've ever written. And it's really a song that it's just a situation. It's not even a great song. It's just a few chords that really flow to each other.
Yeah.
Very simple. Anybody who studies guitar for a month can learn it, can play it. And I brought it to the rehearsal. We rehearsed all my new material in Tokyo.
Oh, really?
We had a series of gigs there at a club. And I wrote new stuff. And I brought it, and like that song, I was almost embarrassed to bring because it's so simple. We rehearsed all the other songs first, and at the end, I was kind of sheepishly saying, "Oh yeah, I have this other thing, but I'm not sure," And turned out like they loved the song, and this song really is about playing those chords with very small variations. Those are important though. And not really doing much. You don't have to solo, nobody has to do anything, but you have to sort of hang in there in this musical world with full presence, and the small variations might be a little dynamic and a little bit of a timing, and you change your voice lightly, but you don't want to play these are all really regular chords. You don't really want to play a funny tension.
Yeah.
Unless it really comes like in a moment, but it's not about that song. So in a way, this song is almost like a metaphor or example for a truth in music, which is you don't actually have to do anything. If you just kind of play the song or play whatever you hear or feel, that this is also true for a free situation.
Yeah.
If you just go for that, that's a very, very good contribution already, maybe the best.
Yeah.
And so this was, and of course other songs on this record have more material and more complex, but we still, also when playing over more involved music, I still, of course, have this ideal, that I have material and I have licks and everything like everybody else, but I want to be as much in the moment as I can be, and to sort of have my music guided by what I hear and what the other people play.
Yeah, no, but it's not about, I think, playing the G chord. It's you playing it, because it's like, if a student of mine plays a G chord, it's a G chord. But if you play it on that song with your sound, or let's say if Bill Frisell plays one note, or a major third and interval, it's like, how does he do that? You do that and you're like, well, yeah, it's the same tones, but it doesn't sound like Bill Frisell. So that's what I was also thinking, when I
see. Well, there's a lot of information in one sound. That's true.
Yeah.
And it's kind of that's a mystery in a way, that you can, not a mystery, but something very interesting, that you can lay so much vibe and information into one tone. And of course, many of the great artists that we admire and listen to, you listen to one note and you know who it is.
Mm-hmm.
And that's interesting. It's and this is really beyond where the note is in pitch to the chord, and this is beyond where the note is in time. This is if this person just plays this isolated one note or one simple chord, it has a sound, you know, and the sound is kind of everything, because with this sound you express already so much. When Mehldau sits down on the piano and just tries the piano and just plays one minor triad, it has a sound, you know. And Aydin Esen, this Turkish pianist that I adore, he has a sound very different. I mean, it's just about the touch, and then of course comes the whole other realm of, you know, harmonic world and melodic and form and stuff. But in a way, the sounds question maybe the most important. Hard to really practice that though. But one thing I would say is that like whenever a student or a musician practices, I think one should always have that sound world in mind, and a kind of a sort of a physical well-being, you know. I personally like practicing because of that, you know, because of that it makes me feel good, and I try to have a good feeling in the hand and in the body, and you know, it kind of turns me on. It's like gymnastics or something, like very it's kind of meditative in a way.
For me as well. It's like a routine, a cat routine. We have to do it. Like I'm lost if I don't. I mean, for a day or two I'm okay, but then I'm like, you know, I have to do it. It's funny.
And out of that zone, you know, many things can come. Like if you're just relaxed and in that state of exploration, really listening hard to everything you play.
That's true. Is that how you write music also? Like, let's say for this new record, like Camino or whatever, these songs that are have more complex harmonies or like really beautiful melodies always. Like, how do you start writing a song, let's say or a composition for this? Speaking of this project of Angular Blues.
Well, the one real big incentive always is the knowledge of who's gonna play.
Okay. So you were aware of Scott instead of Larry.
When I knew that they were doing this, I was kind of also writing for them in mind. So this turns me on. I can see the situation. And there's one thing that I do, which I want to share, which I share with my students also, is I do something very simple. Like as often as I can, I try in the morning to have a zone of music which is completely without expectations, or it's not practicing. I'm just grabbing an instrument, you know, that I feel like, and just play whatever comes, and without judging. It can be super simple, it can be complex or out, or it can be a song that I had from somebody else, or there's no better or worse in this situation. It's just about, let's say, 20 minutes of just free flow, whatever comes. And this free flow is cleansing in a way. It's like a diary, you know, stream of consciousness. You just write down everything that comes to your mind. If it's smart or not, doesn't matter. And,
you record that, or?
No, I don't, but sometimes I stumble upon something that I like, a little cell, and then I quickly record that cell and continue with my kind of expectationless thing.
Playing,
But then these cells add up, you know. So I have many of them.
It can be like a harmonic progression or melody or whatever, right?
Yeah. Right, it can be a small situation, but usually it has such a specific shine or something that I am attracted to, so that when I revisit it, it's already giving me that feeling again, and then I can expand that or play with that idea. So the writing part is something that I enjoy very much, almost more than the playing.
Yeah. And, wow. Okay.
Finding of things is to me beautiful, and I do it all the time, like without a program, without having to. I should write. No, I just go there and kind of naturally finding songs, and I'm in the process right now actually, because I'm gonna be touring with that band again.
I saw that, in the States, right? Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah, and I'm writing new stuff for that.
You're gonna record also, like the new stuff already after the tour?
End of the tour we'll record, yeah.
Oh man, beautiful! Wow, fantastic.
Yeah,
looking forward to that. Yeah, I wanted to ask you, like, you mentioned you write for the people in the band, and how did the change on the bass chair, like, we're talking about two monsters of bass, like, Larry Grenadier and Scott Colley, like amazing musicians. How did that change for you when writing music, like, or the sound of the band? I mean, you and Brian are really, since forever, really tight knit together, but how did the bass change things?
Well, I mean, all of these songs can be played by both of them very well, but when I had Scott in mind, Scott has such a different sound than Larry. Both of them are great, but Scott has a very different sound. It's like darker and more less percussive, and the way he plays is more kind of surrounding me, and there's a kind of a certain bouncy
it's
vibe from him that is very different from Larry, who's like super strong and has a very big, deep and tough sound. So like even on a ballad there would be a lot of attack, and there's a lot of initiative from him, like in terms of what he does in relationship to what I do or what the drummer does. Larry's always shaping the music in his own way, like when do I play the bass note, when do I not, when do I hang up high, when do I, and so there's a completely different way of playing, and so when I imagine when I imagine Scott, I had this sound in mind, and also it was a pleasure to imagine him playing melodies. So that, for example, that song Wandering,
the first one,
this is a song that I really wrote with him in mind, in that register with that tone.
Oh wow, okay.
So of course any other also, so but it's always helpful for me to imagine the people that will play it.
It's a smart thing to do when you compose. It's you make
even
the best out of music.
Play it, like you could do this just as an imagination.
Oh, that's a good one also.
Like think, okay, I'm gonna play this tune with Paul Motian and Charlie Hayden,
man.
Why not? Why not? Just have it in your mind. What would you write? That that info, that image would give you a sensation of certain spaces and so on.
That's a cool idea, actually. I never thought of that. Yeah, that's a cool one. I see a song already, a composition coming out, like Charlie's long notes and, or whatever. Yeah, incredible. But you and Brian, I listened to Friendly Travelers years ago. It came out like, 15, 14 years ago, I think.
Yes,
a long time
2006,
ago. 15 years, yeah. I listened to it so much. You guys seem to be, you have such an amazing connection, and your records with Marc Johnson and the ECM stuff. How did this where does your story with Brian begin? When did you first play or meet, and how did you get like this amazing chemistry going on? I mean,
well, I met him in at a workshop in Denmark by the name of Vallekilde.
mm-hmm.
There's a song that's called Vallekilde. That's kind of in memory of that meeting. That's the first time I met him, and we both taught there. We hung and got to know each other. You know, it was a group of teachers, very interesting group. Django Bates was there, and Trilo Kurt too, and I think Jerry Bergonzi. I'm not sure.
Wow.
I think so. Anyway, it was great to meet him. Of course, I was very aware of him anyway, as a listener. And then we played some sessions, you know, a few times, and just kind of developed a nice vibe. And at some point, I asked him to play with me. I think in New York, it was a small gig in the Cornelia Street Cafe. And so we started playing together, and a lot of times actually we played a lot of concerts, and I always had the feeling that, you know, the way that Brian plays any music, but when I played with him my music, it was always super supportive of the music.
Yeah.
It was also, in a way, I was learning so much playing with him. I still consider myself extremely fortunate to play with him. And there was just some aesthetic zones where we really met, like on this, you know, Friendly Traveler record. We clearly love some of the same music, you know, and he's also really not afraid of beauty. Like once in a while, he also goes for that kind of simple, beautiful song, you know, like from a songwriter type of aesthetic. He writes these songs himself.
Yeah, Fellowship. I love those groups. It's
yes,
like, that's incredible. World. Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah.
And then there's, you know, there's this jazz swing, amazing way he plays that music. So there's such a scope of types of music that you can do with him really well. I mean, the way he plays a backbeat is incredible.
Yeah.
Just a backbeat, like, with, you know, it's just sticky and sits there so beautiful, and it's like, it's stylistically kind of super open, right? That type of backbeat could be behind a country song, or behind Joni song, or behind a blues piano player, or whatever, you know. It's like, it's not a backbeat that says pop or fusion or whatever, you know. It's just like organic. I love it.
Yeah, it's so beautiful what you described now. Yeah, that's Brian. Yeah, I mean, I'm such a fan of his playing. Like, you know, like he does one thing on a cymbal or whatever, and it's just like, how do you do that? Or he's like playing so quiet, and he creates so much tension, or, you know, or it's incredible. Yeah,
I mean, there's the way that Brian understands the energy of a song.
Yeah.
And he very quickly, actually, with, you know, the second, third run through, is like he really gets the energy of the song and shapes it in an incredible way.
Yeah.
Which is that's kind of interesting when you play some of these songs with other people later. You know, you kind of, then it becomes even more a mystery how he could come up with that, you know, because I never tell him anything really. I just put the music, and unless there's a big misunderstanding, like it's swing, but it shouldn't be, or something. But anyway, he never say anything, but he always like finds that DNA very quickly, and that dynamic range is also super important to me because, you know, when I play acoustic guitar, there's a certain level of volume that we can't go over, because otherwise I'm suffering on that instrument, even though we amplify it well. But so that world is like, and Brian plays very differently if I play acoustic guitar or electric guitar. I never had to tell him this.
Yeah, sure.
It's also one of those things, you know, if you're constantly volume wise too high or too low, it's like that also says something about your listening, you know.
Yeah, true.
You know, if you have to tell somebody that he's too loud, it's already not so great, you know.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's true. Speaking of loudness, and we mentioned sound before, I read in an interview once that you were heavily influenced by Pat Metheny, and that you owe to him so much. And I wanted to ask you, when was that moment? You know, when I was a teenager, one of the first albums, the first jazz album I kind of heard and fell in love with was The Road to You by Pat Metheny Group, because it was so approachable for me then, you know, the easy melodies, although when you dive into the music, it's actually quite complex, of course. And but when was that moment for you, when you first heard, let's say, Pat, or like someone from the jazz realm that kind of blew your mind? You remember that? When was that?
Yeah, Pat was one of the first, and it was actually Off Ramp, the album.
Oh man, yeah. Are You Going With Me and that stuff? Yeah. James. Yeah.
James. Yeah. And it was just, fell in love immediately and was completely into it, obsessed, and really listened to him a lot. I've never transcribed him or
really. Wow.
But I sounded like him. Like it was, you know, I really wanted to try on this coat. I was so into it, and I was, you know, it was a great voice to me, like in kind of a new color in the jazz guitar.
Yeah.
Fresh, and there was so much joy, and also the you know, that type of abandon in his solos and stuff.
Yeah.
I love that, you know, that passion, and the songwriting, of course, amazing songs that he wrote. And still writes. So yeah, that was a big influence. And then at that time, it was basically the artists of ECM that really got me into jazz, like Keith Jarrett and Dave Holland and Jack DeJohnette, and a band called Codona with Don Cherry and Ralph Towner, Abercrombie, you know,
this thing,
Gismonti, Jan Garbarek, and so on and so on. Like, and that's how this whole jazz thing opened up to me. And then later I kind of, you know, went further back in history, but the opening was through these guys.
Yeah, it's funny. It's so many people have the same story, like that, you know, you start with this. ECM was so important for everyone. I mean, now you're part of the family, of course, for the last few years, but it presented such a huge heritage for all of us, like because of this accessible sound in a way. I don't know, what was it? It had something. All these groups that you mentioned, you know, it's it's so beautiful.
Very remarkable achievement.
Yeah.
That label, you know, Manfred Eicher's work.
Yeah.
And of course, on ECM, because of a certain openness, I think.
Yeah.
In terms of space, and you know, there wasn't this feeling of we having to burn today, you know, like it has to be the killing shit.
Yeah.
I think it's more about like concentrated and conscious contributions, and also the embracing of space.
Yeah.
And just very focused way of playing music. Yeah, all these artists have, you know, made such a contribution, unbelievable impact on me. Of course, there's a lot of artists that are not on ECM that are also, you know, super important to me. But that first introduction to improvised music, jazz music, was really through Manfred Eich's work.
Yeah. How is it for you, like working with him being, you know, the mastermind behind the sound, of course, of the ECM, and you starting with Driftwood like 7 years or 8 years ago, and Time Travel a little bit before, but at Driftwood as a band leader, how is it like working with him? I mean, you know, him being like probably like a band member on the side, or if you can explain this process.
One thing that I really like about the process is like there's very little small talk. It's really very concentrated. It's all about the music. And then when the session is over, you know, you go to eat, and then, you know, you hang and you have fun. But in that studio, there's, you know, there's very concentrated atmosphere, because you have to catch the moment. You know, that flow that might exist on this one take, it only exists on that take. On the other take, it has another one, you know, another kind of flow, or less of it, or whatever. So you have to be, that moment is so important. It's not about gathering materials to stitch together for a good recording. This is also a good method of making music. You know, many albums have been made like that. But on an ECM recording, it's like you play a concert in a way.
Yeah.
Here's my version of this tune now, you know, and maybe again, but that's kind of it. There's no editing later, or very little, like definitely no single instrument editing. Sometimes there's an editing of the whole ensemble, you know, the introduction from this and but very little. And generally the instruments sound amazingly good, you know, already. The way Manfred and his engineers approach this. So it's super concentrated, and it's yeah, well, it's a completely different experience than my other albums, which I've produced myself, you know. Where I have also like fixed whatever I wanted to, you know, any note that I didn't like, I fixed, you know, in the past. So this and this is a different type of recording which I like, and it's really about that. It's all about that conversation between the instruments. That's, you know, and listening, and, you know,
that's what jazz and improvisation is all about, I guess. How was it the first moment when you recorded for ECM? How was that like feeling for you? I mean, if you remember, you know, you had like this ECM behind you.
Yeah, it was definitely a big moment in a way. Like, you know, I thought I was ready for that moment, and but it still was. It was a big moment, you know. It was like, I'm gonna give everything now, you know. I hope this works, you know. And then it was actually I remember it was a tune with the acoustic guitar. I don't remember which one. Maybe it was even Uptown, the song that I wrote for Ralph Towner. With him in mind, and I felt good, you know. It felt good with these musicians, my headphones, the guitar sounded good, so it went well. And then, you know, you go from one to the other, but generally, like, I would say that one thing that's really helpful generally with recording is if you can leave behind the vanity that you have to be great.
That's heavy. This
is a challenge. Everybody wants to be great, you know. but that's really not how music is happening.
True. It's heavy. Yeah. It took me a long time, still does, to be aware of that when you're, you know, to get into that zone, what you're saying, to be like, okay, I don't have to show everything on this song or even on that album, just serve the music. And, you know, that's when beautiful music is created, I guess. You know, hard one, especially for us guitarists. I think that's like, it's a funny world, the guitar world. So,
yes.
Yeah. But
I mean also what I wanted to say is that I don't mean that you have to play very little all the time.
No, sure.
Can be a lot of notes and still be completely sorry.
Oh, no worries.
It can be a lot of notes and still be, you know, totally natural. How do I turn this off? You know, it's like people often misunderstand what I'm saying and say, you know, I'm only playing very quiet and very few notes.
Oh, no, you don't. I know. I mean, I know your music.
That's not really the truth. That doesn't really sound like very interesting music either.
You're being attacked, Wolfgang.
I'm being attacked, yeah.
Yeah, with all the sounds.
Oh my God, my cockpit.
Yeah, exactly. No, but I wanted to ask you also this, but you know, speaking of the guitar world, you know, when you did the master class, and you know, when I listened to your music, and we mentioned Pat Metheny, and Mick Goodrick was Pat Metheny's teacher. He was your teacher. He was your musical partner as well, you know, doing the duo albums, and amazing connection with Dave Liebman. And you know, the advancing guitarist, for me, it's still the Bible. I chewed that book up, that it's falling apart, and I preach also this to the students. And you know, I noticed when you were talking about playing, you know, playing on one string, playing in a certain part of the guitar, and also using humor. I think Mick is amazing that, you know, that part, the last part of the book is my favorite part, the 15 pages where it's just text. And how was your story with Mick? And first being as a student, and then actually, you know, making amazing music with him.
Well, you know, one thing those interviews usually do to me, because I have to look back on my development in life, is that I'm just created such a feeling of gratefulness, because I was looking for a teacher, you know, and I was looking through all these brochures of the American music schools in Graz, Austria.
Mm-hmm.
There I saw, okay, Mick is teaching in Boston, Mick Goodrick. Wow, I know that guy from this Gary Burton record, Dreams So Real, which I love.
Yeah. Incredible.
And oh, this guy, I think he taught some other great people too. And so I was making 2 cassettes. One was with jazz, which I sent to Mick with a letter.
Oh, wow.
I would love to study with you. He says, is this possible? And then I found out who's the classical guitar teacher. So I've made another tape with classical guitar music. I sent that to this guy. And then my big luck was that they met. They knew each other, of course, but they met at some point and they talked about a tape they got. Then they found out that the tape is from the same guy. Just in one tape it's Bach, and in the other tape it's jazz. So they were like, yeah, let's help this guy. So they organized this kind of scholarship for me, which made it possible for me to go there when I was 21, I think. And at that time, it wasn't that common that, you know, that you go to Boston to study, you know. And it was kind of a big decision for me, but a great one. And of course, with Mick was such a great teacher to me. He was the perfect teacher, the teacher I needed. And then after like 1 year of intensive studies with him, where I really did some of his program, you know, this playing on one string, learning the scales that way, with this meditation exercise and so on. And then we started to play duo, and in his house, but then in clubs, and we started to gig, and then at some point we made a record. But generally that, that support from Mick, that input from Mick was super important. And he also was, very generous in recommending me to some of his friends, like people that I played with later,
like Gary
Paul
Burton
Motian,
or yeah,
they would call Mick, like, how is this guy? And Mick said, yeah, he's okay, And Paul plays a gig with me, that. So Mick was really helpful, and yeah, it's like, I looked for a teacher and I found him.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah. When was that? I also wanted to ask you, I want to ask you about Paul a little bit later, also, and Marc Johnson, but just one question about that period, like, how did time zones happen, and what was the moment when you said, like, I'm ready to become a band leader? Like, how did that one happen?
Well, I kind of had a band pretty early on. Time Zones was the first record of my trio.
Yeah.
That trio with two Austrian musicians, Peter Herbert and Alex Deutsch. And this trio I played with a lot back in Austria.
Okay.
And this was still very heavily under the Pat Metheny influence. But I was like, I was so burning to play with my stuff that I was just, I was organizing the gigs, and I was, taking on the role of the band leader, which is very different from the sideman role.
Yeah.
It's not only that it's the musical direction, but it's, basically you provide the situation in which it happens. And this was, so this record we recorded in Boston, I think, the first year we were there. And it was clear, like, because I love writing music, and because I want to play those songs and play over those songs, I always, worked on making that possible. And for a long time, I booked my own gigs, like really big tours I booked myself, with big festivals. Because I didn't have an agent, and I thought, okay, I have to do it myself. So I didn't do it so well, but with, I really wanted to play.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes it was like 2 months of just booking.
Yeah,
maybe a little bit of practicing, but I was because I just wanted to play.
Yeah.
And of course later I found agents that represented me, but in the beginning I did it myself, and it was also kind of important lesson, to how to deal with the business aspect, and to not take it personally.
Yeah.
In the beginning, you're like, everybody who doesn't book you, you're like depressed. Why doesn't he want me?
True.
It's so great. But then you get over it. Okay, so I'm not playing there. And it doesn't mean it's no attack on you. It's just they just don't want to book you.
Yeah.
This year, maybe they do next year. I don't know. Or they don't know you, or you never know the reason. But after a while, you get into this game. It's also a game, this whole business thing. And it was important for me to learn, and also, like, what kind of fees are, to get a feel for
the financial part of
all these things, and how to treat your sideman well, and what do you need from the promoter to make that possible, and all that stuff. But just generally, like, an all-in attitude, like, I'm doing everything I can to play a good gig with my band. at that age, like completely into it. So that's kind of almost necessary, unless you are like, discovered with 16 by some agent who says, this, I'm going to do everything for you. You just need to make your music. Bless you if that happens to you. But, I think that type of long-term commitment, musical in all other ways, is really necessary.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. It's funny, like you mentioned that. I remember also, I still book my own tours. I mean, but it's funny, like in the beginning, like you said, I wrote an email, and I don't know, to a jazz club in Germany, and then upset, of course, sending hundreds of emails, and 96 didn't answer. And then I was, and they didn't even answer that they don't want me. And, now, of course, it's like, yeah, sure. I know how it works. It's like, they are busy. They don't want you, maybe next year, like you said. But in the beginning, it's just like this blind belief that you have to play in Jazz Club Erfurt, or I don't know, Dresden, or whatever, It's bizarre, but so true what you said. Yeah, it's funny. But Wolfgang, I wanted to ask you, speaking of treating Sidemen, there's this record Perspective that you did, and I don't think it can be better, can't go better. Talking of Sidemen, I mean, like, Marc Johnson and Paul Motian.
Yeah, and it's I don't know how that, I mean, I was so cocky, I mean, I was just calling these people, do you want to play with me? I have music. And, through some recommendations, they knew me, they had heard of me, luckily. They said yes. And then this trio with Paul Motian and Marc Johnson was, it was incredible thing for me. I mean, generally Paul Motian to play with him and to get to know him. I played with him many gigs with him, with my band, and a few with the
Electric Bebop
band, Electric Bebop band, and the same thing with Marc. First he was with me, and then he called me for his trio, for this Right Brain Patrol.
Yeah.
So that was an amazing thing, and Paul Motian, wow, one of a kind. Nobody hits the drums like that guy. I mean, it's just a sound that's his own conception of how to deal with time, and it's just killing. And there was an interesting story. In the beginning, I brought a lot of music to this band, right? A lot of music I had written, and put a music stand with all my pieces, one to Marc, one to Paul. This was way before Sibelius and stuff. Everything was
sure.
And Paul, the first thing Paul does is he takes the music stand, puts it away.
I've heard that so many times.
That's the first message I get. So basically he says, I'm not reading. I'm not into reading. So that meant that about 60% of the songs, or 50%, were out, because there are certain type of things kind of impossible to play without reading, or you would have to rehearse days and days. So, but the rest stayed, and what sounded amazing, of course. And then there's some, brought some other tunes in that would fit that situation. And it was great. It was fantastic. The experience was great. But, this is also old school, like super honest. I'm not into reading. I don't want to look at the page all the time.
Yeah.
And just this, I miss Paul. Wow. I mean, when these kind of people leave, that music leaves, that type of that drumming is gone. That's him.
Yeah, you immediately hear it.
I thought like this when, with Charlie and also with Zavinul and all these people with that super individual sound. That's that. Let's celebrate it for what it is.
Yeah, I agree.
Incredible contribution.
Yeah, agree. It's funny you mentioned this with Paul, like the Swiss trombone player Samuel Blaser. He told me like he also did a record with Paul, and they did in the studio the first song, and they played it, and Paul said like, man, this sounds like Christmas music. And then they did like a free improv, and then it was cool. And then they maintained, until Paul died, like a friendly relationship. They played together and everything. But the first encounter was kind of like this, like you said, this old school, like, what is this? It's
he
quite
could be grumpy.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah, it's quite funny. No, it's amazing when I look at the records I have you here and what I've listened that I don't. You've had the chance to play, like you said, with the world's greatest bass players, if we just go through, and drummers, and that's really incredible.
Yeah, I'm super lucky.
It's
and I
amazing.
kind of in the first part of my life, I was not aware of this luck and blessing. I was kind of just with this super ambition. I was just going and going, and then since many years now, I'm really aware of this, the beauty of this story for myself.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
What great encounters I had and I'm still having. So this also kind of feeds me in terms of my work ethic, because I want to, do everything to celebrate those musical moments with these types of musical partners.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be really ready when I play with them every time.
Yeah,
and that's a nice, like that's a different type of ambition. It's more like a thankful, joyful work.
Yeah,
it's less about my own profile and my own career and stuff. That is also a part. The career is important because you live from that, but the main source of inspiration is finding music, finding sounds, and to have these beautiful conversations with other musicians that you like.
Yeah, I agree. It's also with these amazing people. That's like how it is. It's so easy to make music, right?
It is.
Yeah,
it is. Many. It's easy to play with some people, and it's very hard to play with other people. And that doesn't mean that the other people are not as good.
Yeah, sure.
It's often really a chemistry thing.
Yeah.
And sometimes it takes a long time until you can play with somebody. Like, for example, when I played with Jeff Ballard, for a long time we weren't really playing together well. We tried, we kept trying. And now we love to play with each other. And it's just sometimes it takes time, and you have to figure out, especially with drummers.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to figure out the key, like how does it gel?
Yeah, I agree.
Dr. Jazz.